Let's talk about piezos. I really remember building my first cigar box guitar. This is the one I built back in 2010. This was my first one. As I've shared, one day I was on the internet just looking around at cool stuff and I saw a cigar box guitar and I said, man, I've got to build that. I'm not a musician. I don't play a guitar. Don't know the first thing about it. But I said, I think I can do that. So I set about building this instrument and I learned all I could. I looked up all the sources. I looked up the information and then I set out to build it. Learned all kinds of new stuff about an instrument. Never knew what a nut was until I built my first guitar. And so I got going on it. And I remember the excitement as it came together. I got the box. I built the neck. I put the frets on. I got it all put together. And it was just unbelievable what happened when I plugged it in. I had basically just used a piezo and I plugged it in and it came to life. And I was like blown away. And that was really cool. Like a lot of people, my first few boxes, my first few builds were using piezos. It took me a little bit longer to warm up to the idea of a pickup because it was a bit intimidating. But once I figured that out, I've kind of done mostly pickups now. I still do occasionally piezos, but most of the time I'm doing some kind of pickup. So what is a piezo? Well, they look like this, or they look like this. This happens to be one of the piezos I sell. It's a pretty good quality industrial grade piezo. What is a piezo? Back in the 1880s, a couple of physicists with the name Curie had discovered that they could get electricity to flow through a crystalline structure. They'd actually tap the crystal and they would see that the electrons would begin to flow. And so they were actually kind of creating electricity. And so from there, they experimented, they learned, and they kind of came up with crystalline structures that actually could pass this electricity. And then they found out how to make them kind of in an industrial fashion. So if you see a piezo, you probably are around them more than you know. If you have a barbecue pit and you press that little button to ignite it, that's probably a piezo inside there. Anytime your smoke alarm goes off, that's a piezo because not only do they create electricity, but by applying electricity, you can get them to vibrate and you can get them to make the noise. They've been used in other places, like a pacemaker might have them. They're used throughout industry. There's a lot of things. Parts of printers have them. So it's a very, very popular item. And they've been used in the musical industry for instruments. And they're also used with drums. A lot of drums will work. Because the idea is that once you press on them, once you put some force on them, they'll start to, some electricity will be produced. And then that can turn into a signal that'll go into your amplifier and it will be amplified. Now, there's a lot of different kinds of piezos that are out there. Again, the discs are pretty popular. There are some that are actually a cable. This little length of this cable here is actually a piezo itself, and it can go underneath a bridge, underneath a saddle, and you can actually get some noise. Again, you'll send some power down the line and it'll be amplified, and you'll get noise through your amplifier. I want to give you an example because when you talk about piezos, a lot of people really have a hard time with them. This one is basically a piezo that I have in the line, just a simple piezo. Has a potentiometer for a volume control and a jack. And so I'm going to hook it up to my little amplifier here. And this is, you can listen, it's just really crazy. They're oversensitive. They're subject to feedback. They often sound really bad. So there are some things that can be done to make it sound a little bit better. You can talk about a preamp. We sell preamps. They make them sound a lot better. But one of the things we've done that we find to help them out, if you want to do that, is first off, we put a capacitor across the jack. It's a little white capacitor. It's rated 0.010 microfarad. They're in the line. We solder them across the jack. And then what we also do is we use some of these 9448 3M pads. They're a foam. They're insulated and they work so much better. It tones it down a little bit. So what you can hear now takes a lot of that shrill sound out of it, a lot of that noise, and reduces the feedback. And then with a volume control, you can turn it down. And they actually sound pretty decent that way. But the best way to use it is probably to use it with some kind of preamp. This is a preamp we sell. This is the same one that we use in our U-bass kit. They work really well. You'll see a lot of piezos used with bass instruments, but they work really well. This is actually the piezo. It's a piezo bar. And actually underneath there, if you were to take this apart and look at it, there's actually 4 individual piezos underneath there that are, again, sending noise down the line to be amplified. So those are piezos. We sell some that have 2 piezos. If you think one is good and 2 will be better, go ahead and use them. So we have a lot of options as far as piezo. Generally speaking, as I say, I primarily use electric pickups, but I'm not opposed to using a piezo on some things. They work out well. The cost is a little bit lower. They're easier to install. So don't be afraid to try them, but look at some ways to kind of tone them down a little bit so they're not so obnoxious. See you in the next video.